Tonight, a final flex. The president's last stop in Finland, a nod to NATO's unity on Russia's doorstep.
We welcome NATO's newest ally, Finland, and reached agreement to bring Sweden into the alliance as soon as possible.
Plus, new numbers on inflation. And Japan girds up for military action.
We want peace.
Joint military exercises with the U.S. come amid rising tensions over a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
All this and more tonight on Fake Nation.
The president returning to Washington on a high note after a historic NATO summit. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And from our Washington News Bureau, I'm John Jessup. Good evening. Well, the strength of a larger-than-ever NATO on clear display during President Biden's final day in Europe, closing out a 5-day trip on the turf of the newest member, Finland.
31 countries are now part of NATO, and this summit was a big show of influence for the military alliance. CBN Washington correspondent Hillary Powell is following the president, who says the growing alliance brings allies closer to peace. Hillary?
Jenna, President Joe Biden was clear, saying Russia won't win. Standing beside Finland's president, Biden says the pending inclusion of Sweden means that aggressors against the military alliance should be more deterred.
The issue of whether or not this is going to keep Putin from continuing to fight, the answer is Putin's already lost the war. Putin has a real problem. How does he move from here?
Standing side by side with the leader of NATO's newest member, Finland, President Joe Biden calling out Vladimir Putin. Finland's entry doubles the alliance's border with Russia. Biden touched down in Helsinki after what he says is a successful NATO summit in Lithuania, where allies agreed to language that paves the way for Sweden to become the future 32nd member. The group of 7 also pledged to provide Ukraine with modern military equipment, including long-range weapons. At least 2 people were injured Thursday in Russian drone strikes on Kiev, going on for 3 days. The Finnish president notes he's working to fortify the fence between Finland and Russia.
At the moment, the situation is quite calm. I hope it remains as such. But I just want to tell you that Finnish people do feel more secure at the moment.
Biden met with Nordic leaders, including Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. All pledged to continue supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Peace and security in Europe is essential to U.S. security and peace. The idea that there could be conflict in Europe among our friends and us not engaged has never happened in modern history.
More results from the summit this week. Ukraine is a step closer to accession. NATO is exempting Ukraine from the membership action plan. The move shortens the process for joining the alliance. Finland was also exempted.
All right, Hillary Powell, thank you so much for that report. For more, we're now joined by Clifford May, founder and president of Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, welcome. First of all, your thoughts on the summit. What are your big takeaways, and is there anything that stands out beyond what's been in the headlines?
Well, overall, I think it was a successful summit. And as Hillary mentioned, we now have Finland in the organization. Turkish President Erdogan has agreed in principle, he's not in any rush to get this done, that Sweden will come in. Very important to have Finland and Sweden come in. That will essentially make the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake. This is very bad for Putin. It's not what he wanted. His Baltic fleet is in a place called Kaliningrad. The fact that you have Finland and Sweden and NATO there really keeps them pretty much in harbor. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, expressed disappointment that Ukraine is neither being brought into NATO nor given a clear path. That couldn't really be expected. Don't forget, NATO is a consensus-based organization. You need all 31 members to agree. That's hard to do. In Turkey, they're very difficult to bring along. A path, could that have been possible? Maybe, but probably not, because you wouldn't have gotten the consensus. But the fact of the matter is, the communique was very clear. Ukraine's future is in NATO, That was an important statement. That's really all you could expect. I don't blame Zelensky for not saying, oh, that's wonderful. He has to think of people at home. They really do want NATO support. They're going to get NATO support, but it's going to be support of arms, ammunition, materiel, moral support. It's not going to be, we're not going into, NATO's not going into this war while it's raging. Afterwards, perhaps so. So all of that strikes me as important and useful. And there's a difficult period ahead, but it's mostly difficult for the Ukrainians who are fighting a very cruel tyrant.
Yeah, Cliff, what about Russia? How do you think they see this major show of NATO unity? And Finland, of course, they share a massive border. We know the tension between the two countries has only grown since Finland joined.
Well, this is a good question, and let me try to answer it in some historical context. What Putin sees himself as the czar of Russia in the 21st century, and his mission is to restore the Russian Empire. People may not know that Finland was once part of the Russian Empire, and indeed in 1939, Russia fought a war against Putin. It was called the Winter War, to try to take over Finland. And the Finns were very much like the Ukrainians are now. They were small, they were outnumbered, they fought furiously, they preserved their independence. They ended up losing about 10% of their territory. For many years during the Cold War, they were independent, but they were not as free as other nations of Europe because they had to look over their shoulder, and over their shoulder was the Soviet Union saying, don't go too far. The Finns, for a very long time, said, well, we're neutral, that's fine, that's the best way for us to be. The fact that the Finns have come into NATO, that's a huge blow to the ambitions that Putin has had, and it shows that they no longer want to be neutral or face that alone. They recognize that Russia is a threat and is likely to be a threat for the foreseeable future. So all of that it seems to me very important.
Cliff, just a few seconds left, literally. How much of a game changer is it that Sweden now looks to be added into the alliance? How much of a game changer is that for Russia?
It is a game changer for Russia. Again, Sweden is another nation that has been neutral for a long time, was neutral during World War II. The fact that Sweden is now recognizing that Russia is a threat and remains a threat, certainly under Putin and maybe in the future, that says a lot for European unity, for the transatlantic alliance, and it is a blow to Putin, even if he doesn't admit that and doesn't acknowledge that. It's very important. You know, the thing is, if you have strong deterrence, you have peace. But as soon as you have peace, you think you don't need the deterrence. You let things lapse. It's kind of how NATO has been for a lot of years before this. Once your deterrence lapses, then those who want to be aggressive, those who want to conquer, those who want to reestablish or establish empires, that's what they do. That's why the U.S. needs and NATO, a strong defense establishment in times of war, peace, and everything in between.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Cliff May with FDD, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight.
Thanks, Cliff. In economic news, another major marker of inflation is down and offering more hope in an uncertain economy. U.S. wholesale prices for June point to further easing of inflation pressures. The Producer Price Index from the Labor Department reflects prices charged by manufacturers, farmers, and wholesalers. The PPI rose just 0.1% last month from June of last year, the smallest increase since August of 2020. And with that, let's bring in Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate. Mark, great to have you with us this evening. So news of easing wholesale prices comes on the heels of yesterday's Consumer Price Index report, also showing inflation ticking down. How big of a deal is this?
Yeah, this has been a remarkable doubleheader, John and Jenna, because essentially these reports in totality came in better and better than expected. And we can think back to the early days of this explosion in inflation, where it just felt like month after month we were getting news that was worse than expected. I don't think the consumers yet feel as if the burden of inflation has been removed from the economy. And we have an added burden of higher interest rates now. But clearly this is progress, but the war isn't yet won.
So a two-part question for you. Does this mean that the Fed's interest rate hikes are working? And then beyond that, how do the new measures this week affect the Fed's decisions for future rate hikes?
Well, absolutely, John. You know, we had the central bank begin raising rates in March of last year. It's been a historically aggressive move of 500 basis points, or essentially 5% up in their benchmark rate. And you have to say that that has been working, but there have been other things that have come into play as well. For example, supply chains resolving themselves. This is the primary tool the Federal Reserve has to work with, and they've been wielding that bat pretty heavily here. And we do have a meeting that's less than 2 weeks away. The Fed is expected to raise rates at that meeting by the smallest amount, 25 basis points, and then they don't meet again until September. And it's highly possible, we don't know yet, and they don't know yet, but it's possible that this July rate increase could be the last of this cycle.
Today's jobless claims report shows a still strong U.S. labor market. Unemployment claims dropping to 237,000 last week. Mark, what does this all mean for the overall economy?
Well, the economy and the job market have proven more resilient and even more robust than might have been expected. We've been talking about a year now where our economist surveys of Bankrate have been finding that economists have been saying that the risks of a recession are elevated. We just published a new series on this week, and the economists still believe that the outlook for a recession is elevated. They put those odds at 50% over the next year. But the good news is we have not had a recession as it's defined thus far here. There have been sectors of the economy that have performed almost as if they are in a recession. Technology, the housing market has slowed. Stock market has emerged from the bear market it was in. But so far, so good. And that 50% chance also means there's a chance that we won't have that recession. So we would hope for that soft landing.
Well, along those lines, this week, Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, said she wouldn't rule out a threat of recession. What is that in your estimation or for Bankrate?
Well, I mean, I think that finding on the part of the economists is valid, meaning that there's a fairly even chance that that could occur. But it's more important, John, I think, what does that recession look like? And the staff of the Federal Reserve has told the Federal Reserve Board, essentially their bosses, that they believe that there's a pretty good chance that it's likely that a recession will begin between now and the end of the year, but it will be short, brief, and certainly nothing like the recessions that we've had the last several times when we had double-digit rates of unemployment. So I think that we could get by with something that's very mild.
All right, Mark Hamrick with the Bankrate. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Coming up, the road to the 2024 race for the White House begins in Iowa. Why the leading Republican is skipping a major evangelical meeting and what it means for his campaign. Welcome back. Leading Republican White House hopefuls will be in Iowa Friday, there to court thousands of voters at a very important evangelical forum. But there's one exception, though. Former President Donald Trump is skipping the event, citing a scheduling conflict. Bob Vander Plaats, the president of the influential family leader, is sponsoring the event. He tells CBN News it's a mistake for Trump to miss out, and Iowa evangelicals will take note.
Oh, without question. Half of the battle, especially in Iowa, is you got to show up. And so they'll definitely note that. They don't like being taken for granted. As you know, Iowans are not easily enamored. They don't care about the motorcades or the rope lines or that stuff. They want to ask you the same question 7 different ways to see if you'll answer it the way they want you to answer it.
And that was David Brody's interview, who joins us now. He's our chief political analyst. David, great to have you with us tonight. So what do you think? Does skipping this event hurt Donald Trump?
Yes. 72 font. Here I go again with the font. I always like to quote the font. 72 font and bold. Yeah, of course it hurts him. I mean, look, if you're the evangelical president, the president did the most for evangelicals, why in the world would you not go to Iowa and go to, as he would say, my people? You know, those are his people. Well, if the evangelicals love him so much, why in the world is he not going? Now, the Trump campaign is saying a scheduling conflict. Well, hold on for a second. I mean, I'm not great at math, and the calendar isn't necessarily my thing. But Friday, July 14th is when the evangelical event is. He's not speaking in West Palm Beach at Turning Point USA, this Generation Z conference, until Saturday. Or it might even be Sunday. The point is, it's not Friday. So what's the conflict? This is just another unforced error by Trump. Bad move.
David Vanderplants is clearly very influential throughout the state. He endorsed both Rick Santorum in 2012 and Mike Huckabee, who won their past respective years. Has he given any indication at who he's looking to endorse this time?
Well, overall, he's keeping his powder dry, John, and he probably won't make that announcement typically till November, maybe early December, about a month or so before the caucus. That's what he's done in the past, and I expect him to do so this time around. Though talking to him through this 20-minute conversation, when I asked him about other candidates, how do I say this? His eyes lit up a little bit more when he started talking about Mike Pence. And so he had a lot of positive things to say about Mike Pence. Quite frankly, he had positive things to say about Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott as well. Those were the other two that he talked about. But you get a sense that with Mike Pence, that may be potentially the guy he goes with. It's just a spidey sense on from my standpoint. But he said that we need a bold leader, but we also need someone that your mom and dad can look up to and say, hey, I want to be like that guy, that president when I get older. And Mike Pence would seem to fit that bill.
Yeah. So, David, you know, you've been to Iowa many, many times over the years. How do you assess this race? And is Iowa still all important for these candidates? We know Donald Trump did not win there in 2016. That went to Ted Cruz.
Oh, that's right. Ted Cruz won that. Let's just go back to 2016, many follicles ago, when he won 27% of the vote. Donald Trump was close, 24%. Marco Rubio, by the way, at 23% in 2016. And so, look, what do I think? Well, let me start with what Bob Vanderplatz thinks. He thinks Trump is anywhere from 20 to 30%, which would put him roughly in that same 2016 terrain. The question is, can anybody get above Trump? And I think that's where you look at someone like a Mike Pence. That seems to be, fertile ground for him. But also, don't forget Vivek Ramaswamy. We haven't really talked too much about him. He is now polling third. That's right, third in Iowa. Trump, DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Wait till he hits the debate stage. He's meeting with pastors already. We're going to do an upcoming story soon on the 700 Club about it. It's very interesting. So, what's my sense? Mike Pence, I think, would be the logical choice in any other year. But I don't know. I don't think this year is probably the year.
David Brody, measuring time in follicles, not years or days. David Brody, CBN News Chief Political Analyst. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.
Thanks a lot, John.
And when we come back, Japan girds for war. The island nation prepares for the devastating consequences of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
Welcome back. Well, Japan has long been known for its pacifist constitution, but now it's building up its armed forces in the Asian Pacific region as tensions rise over a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
CBN's Chuck Holton reports from a Japanese island with an uncertain future.
Japanese and American troops are preparing for possible military action. These joint exercises, which took place in June, are the largest held on Japanese soil since World War II. Increasing threats from China have the entire Pacific Rim worried the Red Army could soon move on Taiwan, less than 140 miles from Japan's shores. In the same area, Chinese Coast Guard ships have been encroaching on Japanese waters almost weekly. As a counter, U.S., Japanese, and Philippine Coast Guard ships also held maneuvers in June. Ishigaki Island, a popular Japanese tourist destination, could soon become a battleground.
This year will be the biggest year for tourists here on Ishigaki Island that they've seen since COVID. And that's a really good thing for the economy of the island. But what the people that live here are most worried about is an influx of another kind of people caused by an attack on Taiwan.
We are concerned about an influx of refugees in the event of an attack because we are the closest island to Taiwan. This is an example of China trying to change the status quo by force.
To counter the threat, more soldiers are being moved to bases in the south of Japan.
This new military base just opened here on Ishigaki Island. It's one of the closest ones to the Chinese coast and to Taiwan. And it's one of 4 bases that's been built recently to counter the threat from China. This one will be home to more than 500 troops. Most of the people on this island are very pro-military and very happy to have this here. But some people are not, and it's not so much the base itself, it's the kind of troops that they plan to station here.
Locals have been staging protests here because they fear the presence of Japanese artillery batteries would only make the island a target.
Some say it will increase tensions, but I believe it is necessary to strengthen our defenses.
This former Japanese general agrees.
If
Taiwan is annexed, the Chinese army will be stationed there, and we could lose control of the sea lanes that provide 60% of Japan's energy and 40% of its food. So there is already an emergency in Taiwan, and an emergency in Taiwan is an emergency in Japan.
But that doesn't mean Japan is looking for a fight.
So Japan, it seems to be building up more troops or military. But if you were to ask any of those people visiting Yasukuni Shrine and came here to pray for the warriors, their minds, they don't think about war. Like if you ask, what do you think about war? Almost all of the people would say, no way. So it's not like, oh, we wanted to fight. No, we want peace. So we want to pay respect and peace. So we come here to wanting for peace.
No matter how likely there is to be a war, our job is to stop it, to ensure China's president doesn't miscalculate like Putin did. The point is that if China invades Taiwan, the United States and Japan will have the ability to counter that together.
Chuck Holt, CBN News, Tokyo.
Thanks, Chuck. Celebrating heroes in sports and giving glory to God. Highlights from last night's ESPY Awards next on Faith Nation.
And finally tonight, a heartwarming moment at last night's ESPY Awards, with athletes from across the sports spectrum gathering in LA to celebrate the past year in sports.
The award show hit the pinnacle of emotion with an appearance by Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin. A tearful Hamlin presented the Pat Tillman Award for Service to the team's training staff, whose efforts saved the NFL player's life after he went into cardiac arrest during Monday Night Football back in January. Bills head athletic trainer humbly accepted the award, giving glory to God.
By the grace of God and divine intervention, we had the best outcome we could have prayed for or imagined.
Hamlin called the medical staff his heroes, saying they're bonded for life, and I think he was absolutely right. What we saw on TV was divine intervention.
Absolutely, and neat to see them giving glory to God for that. All right, have a great night.
See you tomorrow.